Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone joining us from across different time zones. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Suraj Jayaraman from Inferred, and I'll be your host for today. Today's conversation is not about AI hype or feature comparisons. It's rather about something most enterprises are quietly experiencing, intelligent document processing, just IDP, vendor selection fatigue. I've been working as an enterprise IDP advisor for a few years now, and one thing has become very clear. Organizations aren't evaluating IDP for the first time. They are rather reevaluating because their current solution failed to deliver what was promised. And yet, there's a lot of uncertainty around how to properly evaluate an IDP vendor that it actually delivers in real world scenarios and not just in polished demos. And that's what exactly brings us all into the conversation today. I'm joined by David Owen, founder of Cactus and Cubby, an enterprise technology strategy advisor. He has helped various enterprises identify the right document automation tools, and he has also understood what truly matters when making this very decision. Today, we are excited to hear his honest, actionable, and unfiltered insights on how to get your IDP vendor evaluation right, and also to ask the right crucial questions before you commit. David, really glad to have you with us today.
Hi, Jay. Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. Yeah, really looking forward to kind of talking through all things IDP evaluation. Hope everyone that's in the call or watching the call on recording finds the content useful and helpful. And yeah, look forward to any questions that people might have as well. So yeah, looking forward to getting stuck in.
Absolutely, David. Now, for all the webinar attendees, we do have a special giveaway. Stick around till the end, and you'll get an exclusive access to David's IDP vendor evaluation guide. This offers a proven framework for real-world evaluations with a focus on scalability, performance, and a detailed vendor evaluation criteria. You can download it, and you can also use it for your future IDP evaluations. With that, let's kickstart our discussion. So, David, could you start by sharing your observations on what has really changed in the IDP evaluation landscape?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, for me, the thing that's really changed is the way that kind of you as a business need to evaluate the solution needs to evolve and change. Some of the kind of key reasons behind that is the market is, noisier than ever. There's lots of different options, lots of different solutions, lots of different angles. Every time I run a market scan for a business, there seems to be new names that will pop up in the discovery phase that I've not seen before. There's a lot of solutions that promise the world with, shiny demos and shiny presentations. So really what that means is it's pretty critical to have a really robust evaluation process that delivers, a really confident and well-informed decision at the end of it. Second thing for me that I'm seeing kind of change and evolve is businesses are often on their second or third go, or even more than that, go at finding the kind of right IDP solution. There's quite a few people I speak to that feel stuck in, a current poor performing solution, and they think they can't change. The reality is you can change because of the way the market has evolved. So if I think, the last market scan I actually did last year for a business, that was a business moving from a legacy system to a new solution, and that's delivered material commercial upside and kind of material risk mitigation. Third thing for me is, explainability now is a real kind of non-negotiable. Wind the clock back 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, IDP solutions and AI and ML more broadly were probably seen as a bit of a black box. You didn't know what was going on within it. For now, what's important now is businesses need explainable AI. You need a closed loop. You need to understand where things are flowing, where things are falling out, why they're falling out, so you can optimize your solution, so you can improve your solution, so you can manage risk. I'm really seeing, what I've called the death of the polished demo. So businesses don't want a heavily curated, heavily polished demo. They want a POC that, as best they can, reflects reality and reflects, what will happen in production. And then probably last for me is sustainability and scalability are absolutely key nowadays. So you kind of need a solution that will be easy to implement. So, you don't have massive professional services overhead. You need a solution that you can trust to sustain performance in the real world, to scale with the business, as it grows and evolves. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing as key changes.
Right. So let's look at that big picture. If you had to point to one shift you have seen in the way IDP vendors are getting evaluated, one thing that truly stands out above everything else, what would that be?
So for me, kind of the biggest shift I'm really seeing is, a lot of it comes back to that noise in the market, is the level of rigor that businesses now need to go to and to put into that evaluation process. So it's critical that you ensure you're asking deeper and more questions, and you're testing what you need to test before you go live and not in production. So I'm seeing, the questions that we're needing to ask and businesses are asking, they're becoming much more kind of outcome focused. So it's like, will the solution scale with the business? Will the solution integrate, with our current stack? Will the, straight through processing the STP remain at least stable as document variability increases? Yeah, will accuracy be consistent? Certainly seeing accuracy become as important as speed and straight through rate nowadays as well. And what will the performance be in not just now, but 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, projecting forward and looking at performance in the future, not just today.
Absolutely. And the word that really stands out to me is essentially scalability. From tech integration to managing volumes and formats and ensuring consistent STP, the straight-through process, scalability still seems to be a key factor here. Isn't that right? Please tell us more about it. Why has scalability become such a critical consideration when evaluating an IDP solution?
Sure. You're right, it is important. So for me, whenever I think about, scalability, sustainability, I always think about two different buckets. So there's your document volume and your document variability. So if we kind of double click on volume for a minute, so your business could be growing, there could be seasonal demand, there could be weekly, monthly, quarterly patterns in your document flows. So imagine your volume spike from 500 in one day to 1,000 in the next day, but you've still got the same FTE to deal with the processing of those documents. Yeah, what do you do? How do you deal with that? From a variability perspective, you could be getting documents in multiple new formats, different layouts, multiple, the number of pages in a document could be changing. If I just think about one example, which is particularly in Australia, and I know that the world over, the ever-growing number of accounting software packages that businesses can use, all of them have got different way of presenting an invoice or a PO or a quote and different document layouts, different formats. And if you kind of think old world, many of those legacy IDP solutions that are still in market and still quite prevalent in market can often work in a very templated way. So every time you get a new format, you're layering in customization work, which can lead to slower processing, which could then potentially lead to some SLA issues. So what you really need is a solution that can scale with volume variability, seamlessly and easily. And one that you don't hit, and I've seen this across quite a few businesses that have already got IDP in, almost a bit of an STP plateau. So it's basically where your STP gets to a certain rate, and it could be a decent rate, but it stalls. And it means that you're potentially leaving efficiency and kind of benefit on the table.
Absolutely. And yes, let's talk about that plateau for a second. Most IDP programs reach around 50%-ish of STP, and then they, of course, just stall. It looks like it's automated on paper, but behind the scenes, the teams are still manually handling exceptions every single day. And you did touch upon some really important points here. The minute a volume surge hits, the system needs to adapt. And that adaptability really comes down to how the platform is built and how frequently it's evolving. Feature updates, for example, exception handlings, customizations over time, and that's exactly what STP climbs rather than flatlining. When an IDP platform is built on a rigid framework with no timely updates, that's when inefficiency really starts creeping in. I would almost compare it with an iOS update. If you stop updating, things stop working the way they should be, and IDP is really no different. David, what's your take on this? How should enterprises think about platform evolution?
Yeah, I mean it's a tough nut to crack, but it's one that's important. So to me, it starts with, it's vital you don't just only think about day one STP. So you're going to go live on a certain day, look beyond that day. Try and evaluate what it's going to look at in the future. Have you got confidence that the solution or solutions you're evaluating can grow beyond that day one rate? So that then starts with making sure you've got a really, you conduct a really complete, rigorous, and robust POC. Try and represent the best as best you can, real world with volumes, breadth of use case documents. What you need here is you need real evidence and not just promises. As part of that POC, what's also critical is go through more than one revolution of the POC model. You need two, ideally three revolutions of your POC model so that you can see, you can plot the improvements between those revs of your POC model. You can see, is the model learning as it goes? It's vital you dig into how the model works. So as part of your evaluation, get deep and understand, how does the model learn? How does it need training? Does it need training? Like we said before, a lot of the more legacy type solutions work on a templated approach. How does the solution or solutions you're looking at work like, and how does that compare? Next, kind of thing for me is human in the loop matters. So, I've certainly come across solutions in market that can create the expectation that you're going to get zero or very close to zero, exceptions that drop out of your automation that then need human intervention. We all know the reality is that's not true for the majority of use cases. Maybe for a very, very simple document and a very, very simple use case, that might be true, but for the majority, it's not. So you need to make sure you're clear on, how do those exceptions work? Does correcting exceptions close the loop and help train the model? Or do the same exceptions keep looping? Who looks after them? How? All of those things around human in the loop. You need a vendor that's got a track record of enhancing and improving the solution and the platform over time. You want to ask for roadmaps. You want to ask for a proof of release cadence. You want to make sure the solution's not static and it's growing and evolving, because the world grows and evolves. So you need to make sure the solution you're using does as well. So to me, yeah, it's all about, businesses too often focus on that day one, but not what might happen into the future. And you need to think about the future, not just day one.
Absolutely. You have raised some really great points here, especially around thinking beyond just the day one setup of STP and focusing on the future performance. It's rather more important to build trust in the solution, to scale and to evolve. But this also brings us to something I really want to dig into, which is evaluation blind spots. Based on everything that you have seen while working with enterprises, where do people tend to overfocus? And more importantly, what are they completely missing when it comes to making this decision?
Yeah, cool. So for me, if I think over focus first, there's probably three things where people over focus. So firstly is an over reliance on what I kind of call traditional due diligence. So this is looking at the vendor and their finances, their customer base, testimonials, how many people, tenure, all that type of stuff. So you need to do that, but that's almost a hygiene factor and an initial gate in your evaluation process. And I see, yeah, businesses too often focus too much attention on that than it's needed. Um, Second for me is, what features does the product have versus what are you actually going to use? What do you actually need? Um, Sometimes businesses can get distracted by the shiny object in the corner, the laundry list of 50 or 100 features, when what are really important might be two or three of those features and how well that solution delivers on those two or three features. And then the kind of last one, we've talked about it before, but it's worth reiterating, is that over focus on the curated, polished POC that doesn't really reflect real world. So they're kind of, for me, where people can sometimes over focus. In terms of what's missing and what often gets missed is, how will the solution work with real world volume and variability? So again, linked to this whole polished, curated POC. A really important one for me that's often missed as well is do incentives align between yourself and the vendor? So do they have skin in the game? For example, to drive STP at a certain accuracy rate. To me, it tells you a lot if a vendor's willing to put some pretty strong performance clauses in the commercials or in the contract in terms of how confident they are in the solution itself. Missing as well is, we talked about it previously, that how will exceptions, actually be dealt with? There's always going to be some, so you need to get clear on how and who those exceptions are dealt with. Um, and then also for me, something that often gets missed is partner alignment. So does the partner that you're looking at and evaluating align with your business's culture, the way that you work, and would it be a partnership that could build, grow, and kind of flourish over time? Because you think you're engaging a trusted advisor here, delivering probably a pretty critical part of your business's process. You want to be comfortable that that relationship's going to build and grow over time.
Indeed. That was incredibly insightful, David. A lot of these pain points you're mentioning are really resonating with me as well, because when I hear these repeatedly from enterprises, they are evaluating IDP solutions. So now that you have covered some of the critical shifts and blind spots, let's make this a little more practical for our audience. For anyone evaluating IDP today in 2026, what should they demand from their vendors? What is the new enterprise playbook looking like? And how are leading enterprises approaching this completely differently?
Cool. Thank you. Look, these the themes on this playbook is going to be covered. You've teased it earlier, and I think we're going to share a link in a bit
Yeah.
around. They're going to be covered in an IDP evaluation guide. So I pulled that together for all of you that are in the call and couldn't join the call. And really, this is my playbook that I've curated over a number of years now. And look, this playbook runs through, the core steps you need to go through, in my view, when you're evaluating an IDP solution. So it's covered in a lot more detail in the doc, but really, in summary, there's 4 steps in this kind of playbook. So you start with your definition step. It's really critical. You define your scope, you define your evaluation criteria. What does good look like? And if you've already got an IDP solution in place, what are the issues with that current solution? So before you even engage any vendors, do your definition step. Secondly, run through what I've called the initial evaluation step. This is where you kind of go from broad funnel long list to short list. You're running through a really clear set of criteria to evaluate people robustly and consistently. This is where you'd have your kind of initial demos, discovery calls. And this, you're probably thinking you might be looking at 30 or 40 in your real broad funnel long list, getting it down to probably 8 to 10 in your initial evaluation. You then move into what I call deep dive evaluation. This is where you do your in-depth real world POC phase. You do your technical assessment, you do your initial view on commercials and business case. You're doing what does the implementation plan look like and all those types of things. And I always like to try and take 2 or 3 vendors through this stage, because then you can compare and contrast strengths and weaknesses and pros and cons. And again, I'm of the belief the more you can kind of compare here, the more robust the answer you're going to get to. And then obviously the final step is then making a decision. And you know that you've been through a really robust process to get to that decision by following the steps that I kind of outline in that playbook. One thing to probably call out, this guide is applicable whether you're brand new to automation, you're doing things manually at the moment, and you're dipping your toe in the water, or you've already got some form of automation IDP in place and you're looking to change. So the same criteria and the same framework applies for both. There's a few extra you'd put in if you've already got something in place, but the core flow and steps is the same. Yeah, so I just wanted to probably finish by calling out some kind of almost non-negotiables that sit over and above your standard IDP evaluation. These are all covered in the playbook, so don't worry. And that's, and it's reiterating some comments in the that I've made through the presentation. So robust and real world like POC. You want to test volume and variability, more than one load of documents, a representative sample, So, that's a non-negotiable. Number two, the aligned incentives piece. You need to drive that vendor accountability by driving aligning your incentives, basically. Um, Absolute clarity on the model, an approach for kind of dealing with exceptions. So we talked about that before as well. So who deals with them, how, where, when. With any implementation, you're going to have, like a go live phase. For me, it's critical in that go live phase, however you define it and whatever time period you define it as, both business and IDP vendor equally accountable for unlocking STP quickly and early, because that early phase is where the model's learning at the most rapid rate. And you want to make sure that both have, again, skin in game to unlock that early STP. And then last kind of non-negotiable for me is confidence in the solutions you're evaluating to scale across other use cases and other document types, so that you're building in future optionality into the solutions you're choosing if your business kind of grows and evolves. So, you'll see in the guide, I suggest you start with a tight use case, with, ideally one or a group of very closely related to drive focus through your process. But you want to keep one eye on the future and not box yourself in terms of the solution you're choosing. So that's probably everything from my side, Jay.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. Thank you once again, David. That was really, really insightful. For everyone else attending the call today, like we said before, you will be receiving a complimentary guide on how to evaluate IDP vendors effectively. Something very practical, something you can immediately apply in your evaluation process. You can scan this QR code here to download it directly, or we will send you an email along with the recording of this session. Now, we just open it up for the questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat and we will answer them live. Check if there is something already on our chat window. Some are already popping in. So the question here seems to be, how long should a proper POC typically take? Is there like a defined period of time? Anything that you would recommend?
Yeah, look, I mean, probably with quite a few of these questions, I'll say it depends, but I'll give some kind of broad guidance. In terms of, I generally work on 3 or 4 weeks for that POC phase, because you want to make sure you're building in the time to make it as real world as possible in terms of volume and variability. And you're building in, like I talked to earlier, 2 to 3 revolutions of the model, because you want to see how it grows and evolves. So generally for most kind of clients I've been working with and running market scans for, around that month mark gives you enough to do a few revs, and get to kind of a robust, seeing the model improve over time and gets you to the most robust answer you can.
Interesting. That is good. There's one more here. What's a realistic STP benchmark we should look for on day one to know our strategy is working?
Yep. So for me, I'll answer this maybe in 2 parts. So if you're moving from an existing IDP solution, I always set the day one benchmark to be on par at least with your current solution, because then you know that you are going to start at the same rate, but then ensure that you have confidence it will go above that benchmark. If you're brand new to automation, that's harder to answer because it's going to depend on the volume and complexity of your document. So if you were, for instance, I was dealing with one business where it was invoices was the document, probably medium complexity. So there was some nuance around kind of item codes and unique customer references on it. And we set a benchmark of 50% versus there's other clients that were looking at engineering drawings. So they are very complex, hugely, number of pages. So for them, 35 or 40% might be more applicable. So you take it on a case by case basis based on volume and complexity of document. The simpler the document, the higher you should be setting as your benchmark. One that I completed recently, so that same one with the medium complexity invoices, we set the benchmark as 50 and they're achieving 70. So we've already seen massive improvement from the existing solution they've moved from.
Perfect. That is good. And then there's another one we have here. Should we run parallel POCs with multiple vendors at the same time?
Definitely. I strongly advocate running with two or three at the deep dive evaluation, so POC stage, um, and running exactly the same sample set and data set, exactly the same model, exactly the same framework, so you're comparing like for like. The challenge for me with only running one is you've got no comparison, you've got no benchmark. And also, I'm a firm advocate for having some kind of healthy competitive tension in processes like this. So, I will always be very open and honest with people that this is a competitive POC and there's one or two other vendors being evaluated at the same time. I appreciate that carries with it more overhead because you're managing two or three vendors through that process. But for me, and what I certainly advise businesses is that extra overhead is easily outweighed by you getting to a more robust answer on the correct solution to choose for you and your business.
Right. Comparison is definitely key. All right. Another one is what volume of documents is enough to be statistically meaningful in a POC?
Yep. So this is going to be another, it depends. But it's I baseline against the document, the use case that's being evaluated for IDP. So, for instance, one last year, invoices, they do about 5 million invoices a year. And we did a POC with 100,000 documents in it. And the trigger is your sample representative of true volume and variability? So with that one, to double click on it, we chose a full week because they get some variability within a week. And that full week would then give the breadth of customers they'd see, um, providers they'd see, and different templates, documents, etc. Versus someone else that might be doing 100,000 documents in a year, 2,000 could be more applicable. So it's kind of, you look at the total opportunity size that's been put through that use case, and then I generally try to work off, a couple of percent if I can, but then pressure test your sample. Is it truly representative of normal? Are you getting variability in there? Are you getting edge cases in there? Because, some IDP vendors hate your edge cases, but make sure they're in there. So that's kind of how I'd work that.
Nice. That's good. One more here we have is how do we evaluate if a model is learning from exceptions, or is it just flagging the same ones repeatedly?
Yeah. So that's by setting up your POC phase and you're making sure that the platforms you're evaluating are logging things properly. So whenever I set up a POC phase, we agree a set format for data and the results of the POC. And included in that is, did it go to human in the loop or not? Did it go straight through? What rules did it fail if there was rules? Why did it get presented? What was the accuracy rate of all your key fields? And then because you're running your model, POC model more than once, you can then compare and contrast that document set and see if it's continually failing and going to human in the loop, or you can see it evolving and changing. So that's how I do it. Set up your POC with a really clear and consistent data extract. You've already got a consistent sample set that they're going to use in every revolution, and then analyze the differences and the deltas between your model runs.
Perfect. Perfect. That is good. And we have one more here. We are stuck with an underperforming IDP solution. What's the best way to transition or update without disrupting our current operations?
Cool. I have a very relevant example that could answer that question for you, Alice. So the way I tackled it with a business at the end of last year, they were on a legacy IDP solution. For some context, the invoices that they're getting are on behalf of NDIS, so National Disability Insurance clients. Critical, they go through in a very timely manner. That business, if they go beyond, say, 3 days SLA, they get calls and churn. So it was critical. So the way that we tackled that was we ran POC, selected the preferred vendor, locked in the commercials, and the implementation plan had the new solution running in parallel with old solution. We set a time period of a month to run in parallel. Once we were confident that the solution that was running in parallel, so the new solution, was at parity or it was above the current solution, we moved across. And we basically negotiated with the IDP vendor to share obviously that carries with it some extra cost, but we shared that parallel run in terms of the cost with the vendor themselves. So that's how we tackled that. We basically went, right, get to the point of POC and decision, run in parallel, have a clear set of gates. If you're happy that the new solution running in parallel is at parity or if not above and green on all your gates, then you switch across, and that's how you mitigate the risk.
Yeah, well positioned. We seem to have one more here. In the current times where agentic AI is taking over the automation, how is IDP significant to document automation?
Good question. um, Look, to me, IDP is almost like your automation engine, and you might have agentic AI sitting around the core of your engine. So IDP is all about, in my mind, extracting as much as you can from a document with the maximum amount of accuracy to drive the most amount of straight through with the least amount of risk, basically. I see your IDP solution like your engine that sits in the middle, potentially of some agentic AI or AI agents that are sat around the edge of it, potentially doing different things and passing things between systems or whatever it might be. So that's the way I kind of visualize this and think about it.
Perfect. Perfect. That is good. All right. I think those were the questions. Thank you so much, audience, for the questions and, of course, for attending. I believe that would be the end of the Q&A session. Of course, at a later point, if you still have any further questions, you can more than feel free to email it to us, and we'll, of course, help you clarify from there as well. Nevertheless, the session recording and the guide, more importantly, the guide will be sent over to you shortly after the webinar concludes, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you so much once again, David, and thank you so much for the audience as well for joining.
Nice.
Good
All good,
rest of
Jay. All good, Jay. And probably just to add as well, my LinkedIn link is in there as well. So feel free, more than happy to take questions from people that are in the call or watching the recording as well if anything wasn't clear. I've been through the process a few times, so I've got the battle scars. I'm more than happy to use kind of those learnings to help other businesses as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much once again. Have a good rest of your day, guys. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.